of the elderly people, and then the supply of the medical care and the needed assistance to the family, to those who stay in the family. So the policies go on in the two ways. One is the socialization of the care of the elderly people with the increase of those institutions and then facilities and so forth. And those facilities are governmental, the local governmental, and at the same time it's very private, the care homes. But there are problems that the governmental institution is inexpensive to enter. But at the same time, there are so many problems with, as you know, that if the government is involved, then there is a poor service and also the low quality at the personnel and then so on and so forth. And at the same time, private institutions, private care homes are sometimes very expensive. And then there are high-grade the care homes, and then there are for middle-class people, and then relatively inexpensive places for people to enter. But then who controls those business? And in Japan, many institutions, private institutions, went bankrupt. So that the money that the elderly people put out of their savings cannot be returned. And also if there is a poor environment, such as the spread of the disease that happened many times in Japan, or in the case of the fire and so forth, who will look over those the private practices? And of course it's a government job to look over, but the government is not doing as well as that the citizens want to see. So it is the citizens and then elderly citizens that has to bear the brunt and the risk of those things. And at the same time, in the family, as the labor force in the family decreases, the government and then society tries very hard to let men take more part in the domestic chores and then the caring the children and the caring the elderly people. But those changes come very slowly. Still, Japan is notorious, but Japanese men are notorious for spending so little amount of time in the family. And the number is really just absurd that they have 1 hour in a week in taking care of the household chores, and then it is rated very, very low among the developed countries and among the countries in the world. So the relationship between man and woman, it's logicalized in a way that it is more a sort of very logical, and then better for men to work and work longer in the companies. Of course, Japanese men are notorious for working, very long hours and staying late there and so forth. And then while women really are supposed to quit the job if it is necessary, and it's considered to be better for the family to do so. So the changes of these human relationship between men and women, of course it's coming right now in Japan, but it is very slow, of course. It depends upon the individuals and so forth. So now government knows very clearly that women cannot be relied upon as those who take care of the situations, and also the family cannot be taken care of. But on the other hand, socialized the facilities and the method of taking care of the elderly cost very much. So who bear the cost of those socializations? So the tax is one of the things that the government is thinking. So right now, the Japanese government raised the consumer tax, and the government tried to convince us that all this the revenues that is made out of this consumer tax will be used for the welfare and to take care of the elderly people. But of course, the social cost is very high. So the government should convince us, like in the case of Sweden and other Scandinavian countries were successful in doing so, that we will pay very high tax. But then Japan is a very democratic, the free countries with a long history of freedom and individualism. So we want to maintain the freedom of maintaining our own lifestyle. And on the other hand, the family. Still, Japanese law says that Japanese people are responsible for taking care of the parents. But with the number of the children decreased, it becomes almost impossible for the family to take care of the elderly people. So right now, what we call staying at home and being taken care of in the family, die in the family instead of being put in the hospital, is something, a kind of a slogan of the government as well. The medical care systems and sending the nurses, sending the caretakers to home, while the elderly and then the people with bad health and some mental problems are kept at home and taken care of by the family. But again, there are many families who do not want to take care of their elderly people, that it depends upon the relationship between the children and the parents. The parents many times are divorced, and there are many elderly people who do not have families or even the related relatives who will accept them. So the elderly people who have the family are put in the families who are not willing very much to take care of the even though they are their own parents or sometimes in-laws and so forth. So the care of the family is divided into two really tracks, one in the social facilities institutions, one in the families. Now, the recent polls tells us that women over 65 want to live alone and don't want to be a burden of the family, nor they want to be confined in the institution. And it goes without, I think, surprise if I ask you that, do you want to be put in to be the burden of your children when your children are busy establishing their careers, or they live far away from you? Not many people can live next to each other. I think that the people will say that they would like, they don't want to make themselves a kind of a nuisance or burden to the family. Or do you want to be confined in the institution, even though the institution may be a better one compared to those of the other countries? Still, the freedom is very much taken away from their individual life. So many people aspire to continue to live alone, but what Japanese society didn't really address itself is maintain the free, the diverse lifestyle of people, the elderly people who want to live alone, to keep their own lifestyle, to be kind of happy and well, and when the necessary help or assistance or the medical care is needed, then it could be provided in some way or the other. Now, here comes the Yamamba stories. Then Yamamba is very much a legendary existence. It exists in the folklores and in the legend. They have a terrible appearance. It's an old woman living alone in the mountain, away from the community. It has a terrible appearance usually, that with the hair going this way, and they don't apply makeups, they don't wear the clothes that will distinguish them as women. The gender is very much ambiguous. But you see those presentation of the images of Yamamba. The one thing which struck me very much, I had edited a book on Yamamba, is that there are very much diverse images of those old women. Some women are supposed to hate men and will eat men when they strayed into the mountain. Some women hate young women, and they are very jealous of young women with kind of beautiful appearance. But at the same time, many Yamambas are very strong, with a tremendous physical strength, and eats very much and work hard. They come down every so often to the village and offer her labor or their labor in harvest and in mending the small things. And sometimes they take care of the sick people with their own herbal medicines. And they certainly will help the villagers in terms of the birth of the delivery of the babies and then the funerals and so forth. They do all these things and then go back to the mountain. And some women are supposed to be the mother of, say, Kintaro or Momotaro, the legendary heroes in Japanese folklore, the very motherly woman with the big body and eats enormous amount of food and so forth. So what is presented in those legendary stories is a diversity of those women who live alone, not completely dependent on the society, and not controlled and confined by the gender code and the gender role of the society. And those Yamambas continued to exist in the culture, not only the cultural memory of Japanese people, but it continued to exist in modern age through literature, through poetry, and through the films, and so forth. Somehow it attracted the artists, the writers, and the painters to have a basic freedom in life and maintain their own lifestyle, even though it will look very strange to the people in the society who really think the gender roles and then gender division is natural. So it continued to appear again and then again and again in the writers. I can name many names, including Nagase Kyoko and Hayashi Fumiko and, say, Oba Minako and so forth. Yamamba became a model for women who would continue to live in their own style, the diverse lifestyle of their own, and have a tremendous the power to survive. Now in Japan, there are about 40,000 people who are over 100 years old. And Japan enjoys the biggest number. And believe it or not, 10% of those 40,000 people are still working and earning some incomes. Now, no companies will hire women or men over 100 years. So how do they get their earnings? It's agriculture. All Japanese people will receive a national pension, which is not enough to live in a way that they used to live. But nevertheless, they have, if they have a very small plot of the land, they will make vegetables, and then self-sufficiently they can live on and sell the agricultural product and get certain amount of the money. And then there is a tremendous health boom in Japan. They always dream of living long with health. So they are very careful about the cleanliness of the air, particularly the safety of food, and then the health care that they will run or walk and then so forth. They try to continue to work very much. So there is a certain kind of business which arose from that. The Japanese people are crazy about supplement. So be careful about the supplement. But so there are lots of industries created to cater to the need of older people who want to continue to live healthy as long as possible and maintain their lifestyle and the freedom of life. And this is, I think, a very apparent phenomenon in Japan. But what is really a problem is that for example, the Japanese government now has a data that the most of the savings is kept by elderly people. So the people over 65 are rich and they have lots of savings. But on the other hand, 48% of those who receive the money to support their lives are elderly women. So it means that there is again the diversity among the elderly people. One are very rich and the others are very poor. But at the same time, the families, of course, differ. Just as the social institution have all sorts of differences among them, the families have differences. The rich family with assets, and then the people in the family can take care of the elderly people. But the families without the asset, without money, without people, without the service, the treatment is very poor. So the problem about the homeless people in Japan who don't have the families to take care of and who don't have money to put in the society, majority of them are men. The women somehow don't become street dwellers in Japan. The majority of those who are thrown on the street are men. What does it mean? Men do not have a power to survive. And then they take it for granted that they will be taken care of instead of taking care of others and taking care of themselves. And so now women, so the men's ways of taking care of themselves is the money. If they save up money, then they think they can buy care, labor, and they can even buy a new wife. I don't know how it's true, but there is an increase of divorce rate among the elders in Japan. That as soon as the men start having the pension, they are divorced, and then the half of the pension goes to women. And then there is a marriage in their old ages. That is very much a new phenomenon in Japan. But nevertheless, I think this Yamamba stories tells us that Yamamba, with their diverse style of life, I think they maintained some kind of power to survive. They are the master survivors in their old age. And at the same time, I think the government should address their policies to the diversity of the older people. The older people cannot be put in one package. There should be the choice between the institution or home, but there should be the third, fourth, fifth way of taking care of the elderly people. So the Yamamba story tells us, what Yamamba story tells us really is that Yamamba is no longer the metaphor for old women who are living in the mountain, but they would serve as a metaphor for men who are living in the city. So I think men should really study Yamamba and try to become like Yamambas in the future. And that's the end of the story. And then young people will be Yamamba in the future, so as a Yamamba myself, I will be cheering you on, young people. Thank you very much for your kind attention.